The rain hammered against the window pane, relentless and cold like the weight pressing down on my chest. It was one of those typical Seattle evenings where the sky seemed to open and spill sorrow over the city in endless sheets. I sat alone in my dimly lit office, the faint hum of the city below barely audible beneath the storm. My fingers traced the rim of my half-empty glass, trying to steady the turmoil inside me. Then my phone buzzed. A sharp, cold buzz that sliced through the silence. The message was brief, clinical: Claire has been arrested. Chicago. Fraud charges. It's worse than we thought. The words hit me like a bullet, knocking the breath out of me. Claire. My wife. The woman I thought I knew better than anyone. The woman I had built a life with, dreamed with, planned a future with. And now she was a stranger, entangled in a scandal that would forever stain our lives. I remembered the day I met Claire, years ago, her laugh, bright and genuine, lighting up the room. How she had a passion for art and dreams bigger than our small town could hold. Back then she was different, or maybe I just wanted her to be. Somewhere along the way, the person I loved had become a shadow, hiding behind secret phone calls and whispered conversations late at night. Derek. That name kept coming up in whispers in my lawyer's frantic messages, in the mounting pile of evidence. Derek, the slick lawyer with a polished smile and a charm that masked his greed. Claire's partner in a twisted real estate scheme, promising clients the world but delivering lies and shattered dreams. The scandal had exploded suddenly, a wildfire consuming everything in its path. It wasn't just the betrayal of my marriage, it was the collapse of a future I had painstakingly crafted. Our savings gone, reputations destroyed, and trust broken beyond repair. I could still see the headlines flashing on my phone: Chicago real estate scam rocks elite circle, betrayal in the boardroom, a family torn apart by fraud. That night, I sat staring at the rain-soaked city, feeling the weight of 1,000 broken promises. The luxury home we had hoped to retire in felt like a cage now, a mausoleum for dreams buried beneath lies. But amid the ruins, something inside me refused to break. I poured another drink and let the bitter liquid burn away the sting. I thought of Claire, not the woman she was now, but the one I loved. I wondered where it all went wrong. Had I been blind? Naive? Or was this darkness always lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to strike? The truth was brutal. Claire never planned to share the life we built. She was playing a long game, one that put her ambitions and greed above everything else, even our family. Like so many before her, she was a predator, using charm and deceit to mask a ruthless core. Derek's fall was just as spectacular. The investigation peeled back layers of deception, revealing decades of corruption and fraud. Clients who had trusted him came forward with stories of stolen funds, falsified documents, and broken lives. His name became synonymous with betrayal, a cautionary tale whispered in law offices and real estate boards across the country. But as they fell, I rose. I threw myself into my work with a fierce determination. Conservation wasn't just a career, it became my sanctuary, my weapon against despair. I took the small trust one managed and transformed it into a beacon of hope, a place where integrity mattered and real change happened. The scandal had stripped away the false relationships and empty promises from my life, leaving only the authentic ones: my daughter, my closest friends, and my commitment to something bigger than myself. Martha, my daughter, became my anchor. At 18, she was already showing signs of the strong, intelligent woman she was destined to be. Her passion for marine biology and environmental science inspired me every day. I knew that rebuilding our lives wasn't just about healing myself, but about giving her a future untainted by the mistakes of the past. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting Puget Sound in fiery hues of orange and red, Martha asked quietly, "Dad, were you ever angry? About everything that happened?" I looked at her, really looked, and for a moment the storm inside me calmed. "Anger clouds judgment," I said. I needed clarity, and that clarity saved me. The rain outside began to fall again, soft and steady now, a soothing rhythm to my thoughts. I realized that betrayal, painful as it was, had given me a rare gift, the chance to rebuild, to strip away everything fake and start fresh. The life Claire and Derek had tried to steal from me was gone, but in its place was something stronger, something real. The night of the scandal would always haunt me, but it no longer defined me. Instead, it marked the beginning of a new chapter. One where I was no longer a victim but a survivor, a leader, and a man who refused to let lies dictate his fate. The courtroom was packed, more like a circus than a place of justice. Cameras flashed, whispers ricocheted off the walls, and every word spoken felt like a public verdict, not only on Claire and Derek, but on me as well. I sat in the gallery, clutching the edge of the wooden bench, my heart pounding as the prosecutor laid out the evidence in brutal detail. It was a tapestry of deception, greed, and cruelty that had cost so many people everything. But as the truth unfolded, something unexpected happened. I stopped feeling like a victim. Instead, a fierce resolve took root inside me. This was no longer just about what they had done. It was about what I would do next. Martha was growing up fast, her childhood suddenly shadowed by headlines and hushed conversations. Yet she refused to be defined by her mother's mistakes. At school, she channeled her frustration and sadness into her passion, marine biology. Watching her dive into her studies with such focus made me realize that hope was not lost. We had a chance to build something real, something honest. The trust, which I had founded years before, became my anchor. What began as a small environmental nonprofit had the potential to be so much more. A force for change rooted in integrity and accountability. I threw myself into expanding its reach, building partnerships, and crafting programs that emphasized ethical leadership. The irony wasn't lost on me. From the ruins of Betrayal, we were creating a beacon of trust. The people who once doubted me started to listen. Invitations to speak at conferences and universities arrived. My story of loss, betrayal, and ultimately redemption resonated far beyond the Pacific Northwest. It wasn't easy. Every step forward reminded me of what I'd lost, but it also reminded me what was worth fighting for. Meanwhile, the fallout for Claire and Derek worsened. Derek was sentenced to federal prison, stripped of his law license, and haunted by former clients eager for justice. Claire's fight dragged on in Chicago courts, her attempts to rebuild her life thwarted by every background check and legal restriction. The luxury she once flaunted was gone, replaced by mounting debts and bitter regrets. Brad, Claire's cousin and co-conspirator, was the last to fall. His once promising real estate career evaporated. I heard he was now selling used cars in Tacoma. His charm now met with suspicion rather than admiration. The man who had been so full of arrogance was now reduced to scraping by, a cautionary tale whispered among former acquaintances. Through it all, Martha and I found new strength in each other. Our dinners were quieter, but deeper. We talked about the future, about dreams rooted in truth rather than illusion. Her passion for salmon conservation became intertwined with my mission. Together, we were healing, rebuilding the trust shattered by lies. One rainy Seattle afternoon, as I stood by my office window watching the drops race each other down the glass, I realized that my life was no longer defined by the wreckage of the past. The trust had grown into a respected organization, its ethical leadership program a model for nonprofits nationwide. We were making a difference, one species saved, one community educated, one life rebuilt. And through it all, I learned the hardest lesson of all. That sometimes, the greatest victories come not from revenge or punishment, but from rising above the pain and choosing integrity every day. Seattle mornings were often cloaked in a mist that seemed to blur the line between what had been and what could be. I stood by my office window, watching the rain pattern the glass, and let my thoughts drift back to how much had changed in these past years. It was strange, the way betrayal had carved itself into my life, like a deep wound that first shattered me, but then, slowly, painfully, forged a new kind of strength. Martha was no longer the uncertain girl caught in the crossfire of our family's destruction. At 22, she was a young woman with a fierce sense of purpose. Watching her dive deep into her marine biology studies, especially her work on salmon conservation, was a balm to my soul. Those fish, swimming tirelessly upstream against all odds, had become a living symbol of resilience, of survival despite the currents that threatened to sweep you away. Our relationship had evolved too, from fractured silence to a cautious but genuine closeness. Dinner conversations, once filled with awkward pauses and half-truths, now hummed with life and hope. One evening, as the sky burned with the colors of a fading sunset, Martha looked up from her plate and asked, "Do you think Mom ever regrets what she did?" Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed a deep sadness. I paused before answering, not wanting to poison the fragile peace we built. "Regret is complicated," I said slowly. "Sometimes people don't admit it even to themselves. But what really matters is what we do next, the choices we make moving forward. Martha nodded, absorbing my words. I could see in her the same blend of pain and determination that had started to guide me out of my own darkness. It wasn't just about surviving what happened, it was about finding a way to thrive despite it. Kelly had become an unexpected anchor in my life. When the scandal broke, she had stood by me, unwavering and fierce. Now, as the Trust's executive director, she was the steady hand steering our organization toward new horizons. Her leadership had been critical in transforming what could have been a cautionary tale into a beacon of ethical governance for conservation groups nationwide. When she married last year, standing beside her at the salmon breeding grounds, the very place where our work had found its roots, I felt a quiet pride. We had built something meaningful from the wreckage. But the past still cast long shadows. Every few months, another newspaper clipping landed on my desk. Claire's latest fraud charges, Derek's desperate appeals, Brad's failed attempts to claw his way back into some semblance of respectability. Their stories were cautionary echoes of the choices that had nearly destroyed us all. One afternoon, Kelly handed me a letter from the Seattle Conservation Society inviting me to keynote their upcoming leadership conference. They wanted me to speak about how ethical principles can survive personal betrayal and emerge stronger. It was a heavy responsibility, but I accepted it gladly. If my story could help others avoid the pitfalls of deceit or find hope in the aftermath, then it was worth telling. It wasn't just my story anymore. It belonged to Martha, to Kelly, to every member of the trust who had committed themselves to something bigger than personal gain. We had grown to a team of over 100 dedicated conservationists, expanding our reach across continents, protecting endangered species, and fostering a culture of integrity in a field often marred by politics and greed. Still, I remained vigilant. Betrayal had taught me hard lessons about trust, how fragile it was, and how fiercely it needed to be guarded. Occasionally, the past would rear its ugly head, an email from Claire begging for money, a thinly veiled threat from Derek's lawyers. But those moments were fleeting shadows compared to the bright path we were building. The rain tapped steadily on the window as I watched a small boat glide across Puget Sound, its wake rippling through the glassy water. It struck me how similar that was to our lives, the ripples of betrayal spreading outward, but also the ripples of justice, redemption, and renewal. Some were lost to the currents, while others fought upstream to stronger shores. 5 years had passed since the scandal exploded into our lives. 5 years of court battles, financial ruin, and bitter lessons. But also 5 years of growth, healing, and unexpected triumphs. Martha and I had both ridden those waves to a new place, a place where authenticity mattered more than illusion and where justice wasn't just punishment but the chance to rebuild with honesty and heart. And though the past was never far away, I finally understood that the real victory was in moving forward, in choosing to live a life defined not by betrayal but by resilience, integrity, and hope. The early morning light filtered softly through the blinds of my office, casting long shadows across the piles of reports, letters, and strategic plans. Outside, the waters of Puget Sound shimmered with quiet resilience, a constant reminder of the mission I had chosen: to protect what mattered most, to restore balance where greed and deceit had left scars. It had been 5 years since the storm broke over my life, the betrayal that had threatened to tear everything apart. But as I sat there, surrounded by the hum of dedicated voices in the Trust's bustling headquarters, I realized how far we'd come. Our annual fundraiser, once a small, local event, was now a prestigious gathering drawing environmental leaders from across the nation. This year's theme, Building Trust Through Ethical Action, was no mere slogan. It was a reflection of every hard-fought battle, every shattered illusion, and every new step forward. Martha had grown into a beacon of hope for the next generation. Her marine biology research, especially on salmon breeding grounds, the very waters where our family's darkest secrets had once lurked, had gained national recognition. She was no longer just my daughter, she was a formidable scientist, a passionate advocate, and a symbol of the future we were fighting for. Watching her present her findings at conferences, explaining the delicate balance of ecosystems and the urgent need for preservation, I felt a surge of pride that no betrayal could ever tarnish. The ghosts of the past lingered, of course. Claire's fall from grace was stark and relentless. Her desperate attempts to rebuild a luxury life through fraud had only deepened her downfall. Court documents revealed her secret schemes, her attempts to forge documents, to manipulate the system, all futile in the end. The very life she had so brazenly tried to construct was now reduced to a string of failed jobs, court dates, and the bleak reality of a studio apartment in a forgotten Chicago neighborhood. Derek's fate was even darker. The investigation into his fraudulent law practice uncovered decades of lies, betrayals, and ruined clients. Stories of mishandled funds and falsified documents flooded the courts, and now he spent his days behind bars, counting the cost of his deception. His 10-year sentence was a stark contrast to the empty promises he once made. His appeals were dismissed, his reputation utterly destroyed. Brad, once a proud developer with a silver tongue, was now a shadow of his former self, selling used cars in Tacoma to wary buyers who distrusted every word he said. His company collapsed after the scandal broke, taking with it not only his fortune but his dignity. The smooth confidence that had once charmed so many was replaced by desperation and regret. Yet amidst this wreckage, the trust thrived. Our ethical leadership program, born from the ashes of betrayal, had become a model emulated nationwide. Environmental organizations sent staff to learn from us, eager to build their own legacies on principles stronger than profit or power. I had become a sought-after speaker, sharing not just our successes but the cautionary tale that forged them, how integrity in leadership could rise from personal pain. When the governor's office called to confirm my appointment to the State Environmental Commission, it felt like the culmination of a journey I hadn't even dared to dream of. This was more than a position. It was an opportunity to influence policy at the highest level, to ensure that the mistakes of the past were never repeated on a larger scale. Kelly's presence remained a steady force. Now married, her dedication to the trust was unwavering. I remember the ceremony overlooking those same salmon-breeding grounds, a full-circle moment where personal and professional lives intertwined in a hopeful embrace. The trust had grown to more than 100 passionate conservationists, each contributing to a legacy of protection and ethical stewardship that stretched across continents. And yet, the past still whispered. Claire's sporadic, desperate emails asking for money, Derek's futile attempts to claw back some semblance of his former life, Brad's silent struggles. These were reminders that betrayal exacted a heavy price. But they were also proof that the law and justice, though slow, were inevitable. The embezzled funds had been seized, court orders enforced, and restitution paid to those they had wronged. 5 years on, the truth remained clear. The only lasting revenge was success. By living authentically, by dedicating ourselves to causes greater than personal gain, we had turned pain into purpose. Our scars had become stories of redemption, our losses the foundation of new beginnings. The rain began again, a familiar Seattle drizzle tapping against the window. Somewhere, Claire probably watched the same rain through the cold bars of her prison cell, facing the consequences she had wrought. Derek marked time in a federal facility, his legal skills useless behind those walls. Brad's days were consumed by the harsh realities of a life rebuilt from ashes. But I turned back to my work. The species we protected, the habitats we preserved, the ethical legacies we built. These were my victories. Watching from a distance as those who betrayed me drowned in the wreckage of their own making, I found peace in knowing that justice, in its own steady and relentless way, had been served. And now, as the trust prepared for its next board meeting, focusing on genuine conservation rather than deception, I felt a profound sense of closure and renewal. Martha packed her research materials, ready for another semester at the university. Kelly's educational programs were inspiring children to protect the environment, seeds planted for a future far removed from the shadows of greed. The betrayers had lost everything they'd schemed to steal. Their dreams had turned to nightmares, their false lives crumbled by truth and consequence. Meanwhile, the intended victim, once shattered and betrayed, had not only survived but flourished, proving that authenticity, patience, and integrity were the ultimate forms of justice. This was more than a story of betrayal and revenge. It was a testament to resilience, a reminder that the strongest legacies are built not on the ruins of others but on the foundations of truth and trust. And so, as the rain fell softly over Seattle, I closed the chapter on that dark time. Looking ahead, I knew this was only the beginning of a new story, one of hope, healing, and a future worthy of the battles we'd endured.